Washington, D.C. is one of the most recognizable cities in the world, but it is also one of the most unusual. It is the capital of the United States, the place where presidents live, Congress debates, the Supreme Court rules, and foreign diplomats represent governments from across the globe. Yet it is not part of any state. It is not Maryland, even though Maryland borders it to the north and east. It is not Virginia, even though the Potomac River separates it from Virginia communities just across the water. Officially, it is the District of Columbia, a federal district created for a specific constitutional purpose. That single fact shapes nearly every part of its story, from its founding and design to its politics and ongoing debates over representation. The idea behind Washington, D.C. begins with the U.S. Constitution. After independence, the young United States needed a permanent seat of government, but the founders worried about placing that seat inside an existing state. If the national capital were located in Pennsylvania, New York, or Virginia, that state might gain outsized influence over the federal government. The Constitution, adopted in 1789, allowed for a district under the exclusive jurisdiction of Congress. This meant the capital would be controlled by the national government rather than by any state government. The arrangement was meant to protect federal independence, but it also created a lasting democratic tension. The people living in the capital would be governed differently from citizens living in states. The location of the capital was settled through the Residence Act, passed on July 16, 1790, which is considered Washington's founding date. The act approved a capital district along the Potomac River, a site that reflected political compromise as much as geography. The new district was named for George Washington, the first president and one of the central figures of the founding era. The name Columbia came from a poetic personification of the United States, often imagined as a female figure representing the nation. Together, Washington and Columbia gave the capital a symbolic identity, part tribute to a leader, part expression of a new national mythology. Before Washington became the functioning capital, the federal government met elsewhere, including Philadelphia. In 1800, the capital officially moved to the new district, even though much of it was still unfinished. The Sixth Congress began meeting in the Capitol building, which was still under construction, and President John Adams moved into the newly completed White House. These early years were not the polished image of marble monuments and grand avenues that many people picture today. The city was a work in progress, muddy, incomplete, and ambitious. Its buildings were designed not only to house government offices, but to announce that the United States intended to endure. In 1801, the District of Columbia was officially organized as the Federal District. Its land had originally come from Maryland and Virginia, and it included existing settlements such as Georgetown and Alexandria. At first, Washington City was only one settlement inside the broader district, rather than the single unified municipality people recognize today. That changed gradually. In 1846, Congress returned the land Virginia had contributed, including Alexandria, shrinking the district to the area on the northeastern side of the Potomac. Then in 1871, Congress made the entire remaining district into one municipality. These changes left Washington, D.C. with its modern shape and a unique political status unlike any American city. The city's physical design was also unusual from the start. In 1791, Pierre-Charles L'Enfant created a plan that blended order, symbolism, and grandeur. The city was divided into quadrants that meet at the Capitol building: northwest, northeast, southwest, and southeast. This makes the Capitol not just a government building, but a kind of geographic anchor. Streets, avenues, and neighborhoods radiate around it, creating a city that is meant to be read as a political landscape. Today, Washington has 131 neighborhoods, each with its own character, but the original plan still shapes how people move through the city and how power is visually organized. Washington, D.C. is often imagined as a government district, but it is also a living city with residents, schools, businesses, neighborhoods, and local political issues. As of the 2020 census, the city had 689,545 residents. During the workweek, however, its daytime population rises to more than 1 million as commuters arrive from surrounding areas in Maryland and Virginia. This daily movement reflects how deeply the capital is tied to its metropolitan region. The broader Washington metropolitan area stretches across parts of Maryland, Virginia, and West Virginia, and by 2023 had about 6.3 million residents, making it one of the largest metropolitan areas in the country. One of the most important features of D.C. is its limited self-government. Since 1973, the district has had a locally elected mayor and a 13-member council. This gives residents a voice in many local matters, from public services to budgets and city laws. But Congress still retains the authority to overturn local laws, because the district remains under federal jurisdiction. This creates a layered government structure that can feel unlike state or city government anywhere else in the country. Local leaders govern, but not with the same autonomy that states or ordinary municipalities usually expect. In Washington, the question of who ultimately has authority is always tied to the city's constitutional origin. Representation is the central political controversy in the district's modern history. Washington, D.C. residents pay federal taxes and serve in the military, but they do not have voting representation in Congress. They elect one delegate to the U.S. House of Representatives, but that delegate cannot cast final votes on the House floor. The 23rd Amendment, passed in 1961, gave D.C. voters the right to participate in presidential elections by choosing 3 presidential electors. Still, residents lack the full congressional representation that citizens in states have. Since the 1880s, there have been multiple efforts to change the district's status, including proposals to shrink it further or admit most of it as a state. A statehood bill passed the House in 2021, but it was not adopted by the Senate. As the seat of the federal government, Washington is a world political capital. The White House is the official residence and workplace of the president. The U.S. Capitol houses Congress. The Supreme Court building represents the judicial branch. Federal departments and agencies spread across the city and the surrounding region, forming the administrative core of the United States government. Decisions made in these buildings influence domestic policy, global diplomacy, economic regulation, military strategy, and constitutional law. Washington's role is not merely symbolic. It is the central operating platform of the federal state, where institutions translate law, politics, and bureaucracy into national action. The city's global importance extends far beyond American institutions. Washington hosts 177 foreign embassies, making diplomacy part of its everyday geography. It is also home to the global headquarters of organizations such as the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the Organization of American States. These institutions connect the city to questions of development, finance, trade, democracy, and international cooperation. This means Washington is not only where U.S. policy is made, it is also where other countries, international organizations, and global networks come to influence and respond to that policy. The result is a city where local streets can carry global consequences. Washington is also famous for its monuments and museums, especially around the National Mall. The Washington Monument, Lincoln Memorial, and Jefferson Memorial are not just tourist landmarks. They are public statements about national memory, leadership, ideals, and contradictions. Museums preserve the country's history, science, art, and culture, while memorials create spaces for reflection on democracy, war, civil rights, and sacrifice. This is why the city attracts millions of visitors. In 2022, it welcomed an estimated 20.7 million domestic visitors and 1.2 million international visitors, making it one of the top tourist destinations in the United States. For many people, visiting Washington is a way to encounter the national story in physical form. Finally, Washington is a city of influence. It is home to major industry associations, nonprofit organizations, policy institutes, advocacy groups, and think tanks. K Street, in particular, has become shorthand for lobbying, where organizations try to shape legislation and regulation. This influence economy exists because power is concentrated in the district. Congress, agencies, courts, and the presidency are all close together. But Washington's story is bigger than power alone. It is a planned capital, a working city, a diplomatic hub, a place of memory, and a continuing constitutional debate. Its uniqueness comes from a paradox at its center. It represents the entire United States, while its own residents still argue for fuller representation within it. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.